Picture walking through a mist-covered moor in the dead of night, the wind whispering secrets through the gnarled branches above. You feel the damp chill clutch at your bones, and in the distance, a faint melody, half song, half siren call, floats on the thick air. No one else walks here, yet footsteps echo softly around you, not quite matching your own. Somewhere between the shadows and the dawn, there lingered beings once woven intimately into the fabric of human stories. The drifters. These were not mere ghosts or spirits, nor were they entirely human. They were wanderers of liminal spaces, the forgotten passengers on the road between worlds. They haunted and helped, tricked and taught, but most of all they drifted, always drifting. But now, these beings have all but vanished from memory, slipping through the cracks of time like the mist at sunrise. So what were they really? And why did the world forget their footsteps altogether? This might be the strangest thing about the drifters. They were never quite what you expected. Not spirits of the dead, nor demons to fear, but something altogether more slippery and bizarre. Folklorists have long puzzled over their nature because, unlike other mythical beings, drifters defied easy categorization. Imagine the creatures as nature's version of security cameras, silent observers and sometimes meddling agents who moved through the shadows, keeping balance where humans could not see. But they also had a reputation for mischief, reputation that could tip from helpful guide to vexing trickster, depending on the storyteller's mood or the listener's fear. In the oldie world, particularly across the borderlands of northern England and the Scottish Highlands during the late medieval period, stories of the drifters filled hearths on long winter nights. Catherine Briggs, the legendary folklorist, described these entities as beings who navigated the thresholds of the known world, and her notebooks are peppered with accounts collected from 17th century shepherds and travelers. One tale tells of a lone drover named Ewan, trudging home through a snow-drenched pass. Suddenly, his path is illuminated by ethereal lanterns swinging in the wind, the drifter's signature call. As Ewan paused, frozen, a figure emerged from the fog. Neither fully human nor beast, it spoke in riddles but led him safely through the blizzard. When dawn broke, Ewan found himself miles closer to safety, but no trace of his spectral guide remained except a lingering scent of pine and the faint echo of laughter. These stories weren't just fanciful entertainment. They were deeply woven into the societal fabric, acting much like ancient therapy sessions for communities grappling with the harsh uncertainties of their environment. The drifters were believed to possess a kind of supernatural empathy. Just as medieval social workers stepped into troubled households to soothe discord, the drifters wandered into human lives, sometimes correcting mistakes, sometimes punishing arrogance, but often providing comfort in exile or loss. Their erratic appearances mirrored the unpredictability of nature itself, reminding populations that certain forces remained beyond control and comprehension. Yet beneath this behavior lay a more profound mythic concept. The drifters symbolized the boundaries between order and chaos, life and death, sanity and madness. In a time when crossing the woods or rivers after dark could mean disappearance, or worse, believing in such entities was a way to explain what otherwise defied explanation. The drifters embodied the very edge of human experience, living in a twilight realm so well balanced it seemed to drift from moment to moment. From the Scottish Orkneys to the marshlands of East Anglia, this belief was widespread but adapted to local color. In Orkney, for example, the drifters were known as the thin folk, and were said to have faces distorted by sorrow and weariness, wearers of tattered cloaks that shimmered with dew. Their footsteps left no trace, but their presence was known by the sudden chill that crept across the skin, like a whisper of something lost. Catherine Briggs noted that these figures often functioned as warnings, akin to nature's early warning system, a mystical security camera capturing moral transgressions or alerting villagers to impending danger. But the drifters were more than just spectral watchdogs or mythic weather vanes. Their roles evolved in response to shifting cultural paradigms. As modernization crept in from the 18th century onward, bringing improved roads, better lighting, and eventually trains, the haunting spaces that drifters occupied began to shrink. The boundary between the known and unknown grew less mysterious, leaving the drifters adrift in a world that no longer needed them. In a sense, what these tales really reveal is our ancient need to reconcile with uncertainty, to personify the fears and hopes that accompanied our journeys through darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Today, we don't see the drifters when we travel through twilight landscapes, but the roles they once played have not disappeared. They have merely transformed. The drifters were the original environmental activists, constantly reminding humans of their fragile relationship with the natural world. In their loss, we see that humans have supplanted them with streetlights, satellites, and smartphones. The ancient therapy sessions have become modern psychotherapy apps, the mystical watchers replaced by security cameras and digital footprints. Yet, despite these comforting advances, a deep part of our psyche still longs for something more ineffable than data and pixels, the quiet wisdom whispered through the drifting fog. To understand why people clung to these stories for centuries, we must delve into a complete tale passed down through the Yorkshire Dales, collected extensively by folklorist Ethel Rudkin in the early 20th century. This story features a young woman named Annabel, who one evening, lost on the moors as darkness gathered like spilled ink, was confronted by a drifter known locally as a wanderling. Unlike the sanitized spirits of modern ghost stories, the wanderling was described as both unsettling and oddly comforting, a figure wrapped in mossy greens and brown, eyes glowing faintly like fireflies. Annabel, frightened but too tired and cold to go on, half curled at the foot of a twisted tree. Suddenly the wanderling appeared beside her, speaking softly in a voice that was not quite human. "Why do you wander, child of earth?" it asked, its tone neither threatening nor kind but curiously probing. Annabel, shivering, admitted she had been trying to find her way back to the village after a dispute with her father. For hours, the wanderling spoke in riddles about the nature of paths and the spaces between steps, lessons wrapped in enigma, but whispered as if the moor itself breathed through them. When dawn broke, Annabel awoke alone but found a small cairn of stones beside her, a kind of guidance marker used by travelers, placed there by her strange companion. As she walked home, the sunlight filtering through the blackthorn, she could still hear the faint echo of the wanderling's words, a lingering balm to her sorrow and the bridge she had crossed between childhood and the grown world. Such stories are not just quaint relics, they encapsulate cultural context deeply rooted in survival and social cohesion. The drifters in these accounts acted as intermediaries for both the external world, nature's perils, and internal states, human emotions marked by confusion and alienation. Medieval and early modern communities lacked the comfort of transparent maps or street lamps, so the myth served to personify uncertainty itself, as well as the moral uncertainties of growing up or navigating complex social roles. This reveals something deeper about how societies perceive help during vulnerable moments. The drifters, as wandering guides, echoed the roles of monastic hospices and traveling mendicants who offered shelter and counsel, albeit transfigured through the lens of supernatural imagination. These tales were part cautionary, part reassurance, like ancient therapy sessions carried out in folklore instead of sitting rooms. As mechanized time and daylight extended, and as railways erased the isolation of the countryside, human engagement with the wilderness changed drastically. The places where drifters once roamed became routes for commerce and tourism, and the magic of drifting between worlds eroded beneath asphalt and electric light. Folk beliefs that once served as a kind of original environmental activism lost their foothold in practical reality, even as their echoes survive faintly in fiction and occasional sightings recorded in rural Britain. But the drifters' disappearance was not just physical or social, it was psychological. What these tales really reveal is how modernity sanitized mystery, flattening the rich texture of the unknown into manageable segments. While we trade folklore for science, we often lose something precious: the sense that the world is alive with unseen currents, that silence itself might have intention or memory. And so, like shadows swallowed by dawn, the drifters slipped quietly from collective memory. Yet, if you listen closely today, on a lonely road through Scottish glens or a fog-draped English common, you might hear the fragile trace of their passage, a reminder of a world where the line between humans and the mysterious was a fragile drift, not a hard boundary. But there's more to this story than faded shadows and eerie footsteps. The stories tell us something else, about resilience in uncertainty, about the human desire to connect with the vast unknown through symbols and stories. The drifters were not just about fear or warning, they were about navigating change, loss, and transformation. In the next part, we will explore deeper the cultural layers that made these creatures central to early social life, their roles in ritual and memory, and why in forgetting them, we might also be forgetting an ancient wisdom about how to live well with the unseen currents that still drift just beyond our grasp. Now, let us step deeper into the shadowed corridors of history and walk with the drifters once more, but this time into their final acts and the lingering echoes they left behind. Imagine the soft rustling of heather beneath tired feet, the chill settling as dusk folds itself around ancient hillsides. The drifters were never simply characters of folklore. They were embodiments of transition, thresholds between the known and the unknown, carrying with them the weight of human fear, hope, and the delicate balance of change. One of the most haunting complete tales comes from the borderlands of Northumberland, collected by folklorist M.R. James in the early 20th century. It tells of a drover named Thomas, weary from a long journey, whose path grew swallowed by fog so thick it bent all light and sound. Thomas's mind stirred restlessly until he caught a glimpse, a figure, translucent yet detailed, draped in a coat woven seemingly from the mist itself. It was a drifter, but unlike the playful wanderlings of Yorkshire, this figure's eyes held the starless night, deep with sorrow. "Why do you seek the road that bends between worlds?" it murmured, voice like distant water. Thomas, clutching his staff, confessed his weariness and fear of the unknown trails ahead, not just of the land but of the change unraveling in his village. Loss of community, the rise of strangers, the silence of old songs fading. The drifter smiled, if only faintly, and beckoned him to follow. Through blinding haze, they moved silently until dawn painted warmed gold along the horizon. Thomas awoke beside the ruins of an old chapel, far distant from where he'd feared losing himself forever. This story is no mere ghostly encounter. It deeply reflects a culture in turmoil. The late medieval and early modern borders were battlegrounds, not just militarily, but socially and spiritually. Communities fractured by political strife and religious upheaval clung to the drifters as metaphors for the instability of their own lives. The drifter embodied the malaise and the uncertainty, even the bittersweet hope that after disorientation, one might find new ground. This should be no surprise. Folk narratives have always served as emotional maps, guiding travelers across the terrains of belonging and loss. But the drifters were more than mirrors of societal flux. They were also guardians of liminality, the places where human experience cracks open and reveals deeper mysteries. Anthropologists like Victor Turner have long considered liminal beings as essential to human rites of passage, and the drifters perfectly exemplified this. They weren't malevolent or benign, but necessary agents in the continual process of transformation. They led initiates, like Annabel from the moors or Thomas from the border fog, through the emotional wilderness until rebirth or renewal was possible. This liminal function, bridging childhood and adulthood, life and death, known and unknown, offers a profound psychological parallel. In a world without modern psychiatry or therapy sessions, belief in drifters provided a framework to manage anxiety, loss, and the inherent chaos of life. They were like ancient therapy sessions conducted in the safety of collective imagination, comforting those who felt lost in life's shifting shadows. The drifters normalized confusion as a necessary passage, not a failure. As centuries turned and society fell deeper into industrial revolution, the landscapes and sensibilities that nurtured these beliefs transformed dramatically. The building of railways, the spread of gaslights and telegraph wires erased the frontier spaces where the drifters once held sway. The wild moors and unlit backroads were replaced by iron tracks and bustling stations, porches with lamps and streets that hummed with electricity. Scholars such as Eric Hobsbawm noted how the mechanization of time and space had a flattening effect on human experience, removing the magical dimensions and replacing them with measured precision. This reveals something deeper about the fading of the drifters. Their disappearance was not forced but gradual, a cultural amnesia brought on by the cleansing brightness of progress. Where once shadows held the possibility of wonder, now they carried only fear of the unknown. Our ancestors balanced on the knife edge of mystery. Modernity sought to sharpen and fix every contour into clear lines. What these tales really reveal is how modern society sacrificed the acceptance of uncertainty for control. In that exchange, something vital was lost: the gentle wisdom of drifting through shadows and trusting in unseen companions. Yet their legacy endures in subtle ways. The drifters' role as silent watchers and protectors has been inherited by modern systems. Security cameras scan our streets, digital sensors track our steps, and emergency alerts crawl across our phones. Much like nature's original security cameras, the drifters maintained balance through observation and intermittent intervention. Today, we outsource this vigilance to machines. There is continuity, yes, but also estrangement. The drifters operated with empathy, ambiguous and imperfect. Modern surveillance is cold, comprehensive, often invasive. It is worth pondering what our psyche misses in this transformation. The drifters were not just watchers, they were storytellers too, weaving riddles and lessons into their appearances. They embodied paradoxes, both frightening and protective, tricksters and guides, sorrowful and joyous. Their stories taught how to journey within uncertainty, to live alongside the shifting borderlands inside and outside of ourselves. In forgetting them, we lose access to a lived wisdom about embracing liminality and transformation with grace. As evening falls once more and the mist rolls back over the dales and hills, some have reported fleeting glimpses: an unexplained flicker, a shadow that shifts when no breeze blows, the soft melody of a half-remembered tune on the wind. Modern folklore enthusiasts often ask, could the drifters still drift? Jungian psychology would suggest these figures live on as archetypes, the drifting between our conscious selves and the deeper unconscious realms that modern life often dulls. In this light, the drifters serve as potent symbols for our ongoing human journey. They remind us that life is not a straightforward path, but a weaving through thresholds where identity, belonging, and meaning are always in flux. They call us to respect the natural cycles of crossing and transformation, to stay open to mystery rather than closing ranks against it. So, as you close your eyes tonight or walk through uncertain moments in your own life, consider that somewhere at the margins of vision and reason, the drifters still wander. They whisper the age-old truth: that survival is not just about clarity and control, but about the courage to drift into darkness, into mystery, into new worlds. And here lies the final invitation: hold these stories close, not as relics of superstition, but as ancient, living wisdom. Share them, ponder them, let them loosen in your mind the tight grasp of certainty and make space for wonder. In remembering the forgotten history of the drifters, we reconnect with a vital part of ourselves and the world, where the boundaries are soft and the journey is unending. Because the drifters teach us something timeless. To live well is to embrace the passage through liminal spaces, to wander respectfully between the seen and unseen, and to carry forward the silent, shimmering threads of mystery that keep the world alive.